Good evening, everybody. Martin Schentke here. This is part 2 of my Christian mental health journey. Now, I said in part 1 that I was going to add on to what I had to say there. If you haven't watched part 1, well, go and watch part 1 because part 2 will make a bit more sense then. But what I wanted to add was that in my 31 years of experience as someone who's been dealing with mental illness, and someone who's been dealing with mental illness as a Christian, what I've learned is that psychologists cannot heal organic biochemical imbalances. They can give you perspective, they can help you unburden issues from your heart, they can sort out relational issues. They can help you to correct incorrect thinking or misperceptions. But if your world is colored in negativity and bitterness, if you have low energy levels, pervasive low energy levels, and everything is sort of tainted with dissatisfaction, and there's a severe lack of passion and interest in everything, then the most likely cause is that you're suffering from some sort of biochemical issue, an imbalance in your brain of neurotransmitters. And if you biochemically imbalanced, it's going to completely color your entire personality and your entire life. You will have this pervasive, wrong, and negative feeling about everything. I remember when I was many years ago at university, I was watching some television after coming back from my studies that particular day. And every single thing that I watched and saw, and every single commercial that came up, I remember it was just all bad, all negative. I could see no positive in anything. And yes, you can get like that psychologically. Yes, you can get it like that spiritually. But it lifts, it goes away, it changes from one day to the next. If it doesn't really change from one day to the next, then you're not dealing with a psychological or emotional issue. Then you're dealing with something biochemical, something that's wrong in the chemistry of your brain, most likely. But it could be something in your body too, like your thyroid. You could have, for example, some sort of food intolerances. It could be a whole host of things. They could be wrong in your body. They could be causing this imbalance in your brain. And therefore, you are perpetually negative, depressed, tense, anxious. And nothing really changes that. No amount of psychology, no amount of pep talks, no amount of psychotherapy, no amount of mindfulness, no amount of encouragement is going to change that. It's not a psychological problem. It is not an emotional problem. It is probably not even a spiritual problem. It's a biochemical problem. If you're going to go then and fix that organic problem in your brain, you're then going to feel much better. You're going to fix the you're going to fix the incorrect chemistry in your brain. And you're going to first of all, you'll immediately basically start having more energy to deal with all this negativity that you see, and you'll have more energy to start dealing with your thoughts and your feelings in your mind and in your heart that are incorrect, that are not accurate, that shouldn't be there, that are pervasive and don't change no matter how good things get, no matter how much stuff improves in your life. You will always feel like nothing's ever good enough. That is not a mindset. That is not a psychology thing. That is not a lack of faith. That is not some sort of incorrect perception. That is a biochemical problem. That is a problem in your brain or your body where something is wrong. It's like having diabetes. If you have diabetes, then you need to take your meds. You need to inject yourself with insulin, depending on what diabetes you have. And you're probably going to be taking your medicine for the rest of your life. And you're probably going to be injecting yourself for the rest of your life, depending on what type of diabetes you have. Trying to pray the diabetes away. Trying to have enough faith to pretend that the diabetes isn't there isn't going to help you. It's going to kill you. You need to get yourself to a doctor, and you need to go about getting some medication, and then you will be able to have a long and happy and relatively normal life, where you can then spend time on growing spiritually, mentally, emotionally, sorting out problems with people around you, within yourself, self-reflecting, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't take your medication, then in the case of diabetes, eventually you're going to be dead. And then you're not going to be able to sort out anything. So, from what I'm trying to say is that what makes me angry is when I hear stories that go like this. And in my mind, I've heard a couple of these stories. It's not in my mind, in my life, I've heard a couple of these stories already, where I hear, and this is primarily Christians that talk this way. And it's primarily Christians that are causing these problems. And I'm talking genuine believers here. I'm not talking, the fake kind that just, call themselves Christians, but they have no cooking clue actually what it is to be a Christian. The story usually goes something like this. Person X or person Y is deeply depressed. They are suicidal basically, or borderline. And then the story goes like, no, well, we went over there and we spoke to her and everything like that. And we prayed for her. We prayed for her that Jesus would heal her. And we have faith that Jesus is going to heal her from her depression. And then you hear, 2 or 3 weeks later, or a month or two later, then you hear about the funeral. And then you ask, like, oh, really, what happened? And then it's, no, so-and-so took their own life. And then in other instances, same thing, person X or person Y having a really hard time, has been having a really hard time for years. And the Christians went over there with the pastor or the dominee or the deacons or whomever, and they spoke to her or him and they encouraged them and they prayed for them and they prayed, and we have faith that Jesus is going to heal him. And then not long after all the praying and all the faith and all the encouragement and the spiritual pep talk, that person goes and kills themselves. Or worse, they live with that problem for another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years and don't get any sort of help. They don't get better. They're just constantly depressed. They're constantly miserable. They're constantly borderline suicidal. Their lives are falling apart. Their families are falling apart. Their relationships are falling apart. Everything's a mess. And then I get extremely upset when I know, as a person who is a true believer, who has faith, who believes in Jesus Christ, who knows that God can heal and can heal any disease, can fix any problem, can do anything. I know that yes, Jesus can go and heal that person. God can perform a miracle, and He can take that person's suffering away, regardless of what it is. But guys, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, God uses what He has already created in order to do His bidding. Now, God has created us. God has created us in His image. God has given us intellect. God has given us minds that can reason, that can think, that can discover, that can create. He's given us the ability to discover the ways and means of the functioning of our bodies and our minds. And He's helped us to figure out and discover drugs and things like that can help us, modern medicine. And people, they get diabetes and then they like, no, I'm not going to take my medication. I'm going to pray and Jesus is going to heal me. I have faith that He will. And then Jesus doesn't heal them. And then they're in deep trouble because then they start losing limbs or their kidneys pack up or they die. So what I'm saying is, I have 110% confidence that Jesus can heal any disease. But I also know that He doesn't always heal our diseases. I mean, look at Paul. Paul had some serious physical problem. We're not told what it is, but he had some really bad physical problem that gave him a really terrible time. And he prayed and he prayed and he prayed for healing, and God didn't heal him. And then he accepted and he moved on. And I'm sure he was using some sort of ointments and medications made from plants of all sorts of kinds, most likely, whatever was available at the time, figured out by human intellect, and that's how he managed his physical ailments. So if I hear of Christians going to someone who's deeply messed up, psychologically, psychiatrically, whatever, messed up, depressed, suicidal, been suffering for months or years, and they go there and they can go and pray for that person, encourage that person, be with that person, support that person, but they don't tell that person to go and seek professional help as well, then they're not doing their Christian duty. Then they're doing something wrong. Then they are a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution. Yes, God can heal all our infirmities, but He doesn't always do that. But He does often give us ways from His already created order to manage our problems or even to cure our problems. That's why we have doctors. That's why we have drugs. That's why we have the ability to be doctors and to create drugs, because He gave us that ability. He likes to use the things that He has created in order to solve most of the problems of humanity. So please, don't be one of those Christians that goes, no, I'm going to pray for this person, and you leave them in their misery, and then they either suffer for another couple of years, or they kill themselves. Don't be one of those Christians. Send them to a doctor. Send them to a therapist. Let them get the help that is available for mental illness that we have discovered up to this point. When they discovered my mental illness, there weren't many drugs that could be used in those days to treat depression and anxiety. There weren't many. There were, but there weren't many. Today, we have a large variety of, for example, drugs that can cure all sorts of things and give you a 90% plus quality of life. And if you don't make use of those things because you have faith, then I'm saying you're misguided. God can do miraculous things, and He's done miraculous things with me. For example, when I mentioned in part 1 that I was running out of options to treat my mental illness and my depression, because every 2-3 years the drugs stopped working. And I was at the point where the doctors were putting me on drugs and the drugs weren't working. And I remember going whole video recording thing, and I have no video editing skills. But yeah, this is all a work in progress. This might turn into part 2 of my mental health journey 2.2, depending on whether I can splice this to the other side. But anyway, let me continue. As I was saying, the drugs weren't working. I went to my doctor. I'm going on holiday. I need my script refilled. Can you please give me a script so that I can get my meds before I go down to my father on holiday at the coast? Get the script. I decide I haven't got time to fill the script in Pretoria. I'm going to shoot down to the coast and I'll fill it there. Get down to the coast, take out the script, look at the script, and the script is for some completely different drug that I've never even heard of before or seen of before. Doctor, can't get hold of doctor. I think, okay, you know what? In faith, I'm just going to go and get this random drug anyway, and I'm going to try it. I did a little bit of Googling or something, and it was an antidepressant, and it was an SSRI, one that I'd never heard of before. Went and fetched the drug, started taking it. It was one of the best meds that I was ever on in my entire career, if you can call it that, as someone suffering from depression. And it was also one of the most longest lasting meds. So that was my divine intervention. I took that up as divine intervention. To me, that was my miracle. That was one of my miracles on this journey that I've been on. Ignoring the tools and the options that we have in the name of faith, I don't think that's right. I say use all the tools that you have faith, pray for that miracle, pray for healing, pray for intervention, pray for guidance, pray for the right doctors, pray for the right medication, pray for that sort of stuff. But don't pray for a diabetic and then tell him not to take his insulin and then be very sad when he's dead in a couple of days' time. That's stupidity. That's not faith. And that's what I have to say with regards to part 2 of my mental health journey. Christians, don't be stupid, okay? If someone is suffering from mental illness and you know about it and you are there to support them, by all means support them, by all means pray for them, by all means encourage them. But you know what? Send them to the doctor. You know what? Take them yourself. You make the booking. You make sure you find them a good psychologist, preferably a Christian psychologist, or at least a psychologist that has some sort of idea of what Christianity is all about. Because otherwise, you're sentencing somebody to suffering or death, and that is not Christian. So that's what I have to say on that topic for now. There will be more, but that'll be saved for the next one.